Spires, and this is a solitaire and cooperative game. I play this solitaire, but you could have a group of people making the decisions together. It is a game of fantasy, with a fantasy setting, with a horror element. Everything is very dark and gloomy and grim. You were there minding your business in your fantasy village when one day the Spire comes out of the earth. Almost everybody is in a weird sort of coma in your village, with the exception of a group of heroes that are still awake, and you will control these heroes, and you'll enter the Spire, and you'll try to figure out what's happening. It's a seriously story-driven game. Very, very intensely story-driven, so I'm gonna do my best to avoid spoilers. So in order to do so, I'm not gonna show you a lot of components. Matter of fact, there are multiple heroes. I'm only showing you the one that you will also see in the rules, and so you'll have to play the game to see the other ones. The main heart of the game is this deck of cards, and so basically you'll reveal the game will have really nice illustrations, black and white with some red touches here and there. Very thematic. There's a strong horror manga feel to it, which I like very much. And so you will have all of these pretty dark illustrations, and then text, sometimes giving you a choose your own adventure type of thing. If you want to do this, go to that card. If you want to do that, go to that other card. Flip and resolve, and from time to time you'll have combat. And so you will need to get to the bottom of the deck, or as close to the bottom of the deck as possible, and reach an end. And so then you'll see if the end is satisfactory to you or not. There are multiple ends, yes, multiple endings, but the story really mainly diverges towards the end. At the beginning, it is fairly linear. Yeah, you can go this way and that way, but there are also a lot of loops. Sometimes I'm giving you a fictional example. You may have a card that says, if you're gonna do that, go to card 29. If you do that other thing, go to card 30. And then card 29 gives you the option of going to 31 or 32. And card 30 gives you the option of going to 32 or 31. So there are several passages where you are brought back to the main monorail with little divergences that will of course give you different effects. Maybe different enemies will be more murderous. You will collect different items. So when you collect an item, there is the time-tested method that you are going to tuck it under your hero. Suppose here it says the great peanut butter filled sword of doom, whatever is the item. I'm making stuff up so I don't give you spoilers. Again, you tuck things under your heroes to indicate that they have different objects, and there will be different checks if you have the peanut butter filled the great sword of doom, blah blah blah. So narrative driven with a strong choose your own adventure element, with similarities to Escape the Dark Castle and Escape the Dark Sector. And I played Escape the Dark Sector recently, and that's how actually I learned about the existence of this game. Somebody told me, hey, if you like that one, maybe you want to give a try to this one. And I'm sure many people playing one will want to know about the other, so there's going to be a comparative element here. The big comparative element is that combat is more sophisticated here. However, the story is a lot more linear, and therefore I find this to have more limited replay value. Once you go through the story twice, you will have seen a lot of the content, not all of the endings, but you start getting a sense of what's happening here. As opposed to Escape the Dark Sector has a simpler combat method, but is more of a procedurally generated story, and so you shuffle together a bunch of monsters in a bunch of different rooms, and so there's a lot more variety there, as not only encounters will be used every time, and those other encounters will come out in different order. Here, if something happens in chapter 1, you will encounter in chapter 1, and not after something happens in chapter 5, and not something somewhere else. So the order is more fixed. Pluses and minuses, yeah, you have more of a plot of an evolving story, but again, replay value is reduced. Look, in the last decade, since the legacy games, we learned to love the story, and we stopped worrying so much about replay value, but I still need to mention it because for some of you, replay value may be a concern. Then the Escape Dark Castle, Dark Sector seem to have a better, a longer staying power. Now, as I said though, the combat system for this one is more sophisticated, and there are more decisions involved, there are more things that you can do, and I just like it better. So in a certain sense, maybe one day there will be a game that has this combat system with more variety, more of a procedural structure, and so I think it'll be really, really cool. As for the combat system, characters have, or the game system in general, a number of health points and a number of armor points, and those will be indicated by cubes that you place next to your character. So our hero here starts with 5 health and 2 armor. In a combat turn, usually you start by attacking the opponents, and each hero gets to take an action. Also, something important, the game is pretty deadly, so you have a range of heroes and expect a lot of them to die. That is by design. It's supposed to, again, give you that sense of horror and dread. It may be a little disappointing for the RPG players out there, which would like to develop a character, but here now there's definitely a time where you're sending in somebody and you know it's a suicidal attack and you just let them die for the greater good of the team. So think about identifying with the team rather than a character. But these characters can do some cool stuff. In particular, when they attack, you select an action from this menu here. And what is really interesting is that these actions cost actual life. You will spend life points to trigger these actions. I like that. What does it represent? To me, it represents the fact that when you throw yourself at an action with all heart and mind in it, you may be leaving yourself open to the opponent hitting you back. So to me, that may abstract counterattacks, may abstract your lower defenses. Or again, it's not just that you're bleeding exactly, but you're just run out of stamina, and therefore you're more likely to lose, to be unable to defend yourself later. But I really like that game mechanic because I always have an easy action that costs 0 and doesn't do much, but maybe I'm gonna invest on a Silk Barrage that has more chances of hitting and do different things. But because of that, now my life is reduced, so then maybe I'm gonna take another action. Matter of fact, instead of the actions printed here that are combat action, you can choose to heal, in which case you recover health. And if you heal or rest in multiple turns in a row, then there's a cumulative effect. The second combat turn that you rest in a row, you will get extra cubes and so on and so forth. So interesting mechanic as one of your heroes goes out there, tries to deliver a massive blow, but then because of this, they are weakened, they take a turn out, and somebody else is keeping the monsters busy. Very interesting element there about the tempo, about the flow of combat. So when you have decided what you want to do, and this number in the circle is the cost in terms of life points, then you roll a d8. Those are the dice that we're going to use in this game, and simply the range that falls in tells you the kind of effect. And so, for example, if I'm reading backwards on the screen. If I have a needle dart and I roll 5 to 7, I inflict 1 point of damage on the opponent. Some effects will have letters that trigger specific effects, and so on and so forth. You have the death move, which again is a bonus that you get when you die. Again, telling you that these characters are going down. They're not all gonna make it. The idea is you're hoping that some at least will make it to the end. So, very simple idea. Decide how much you want to invest in your attack, determining the line of combat you're gonna use, roll the dice, and do something based on that, and see what the effect is. If you hit or miss, if the number you roll is not in there, that's a miss, and whatnot. Then you have, after the action phase in a combat turn, you have the Recoup Phase, in which you're recovering. You choose a Recoup action, and you roll dice, and again, that's when you're hopefully recovering already some of the health that you invested in your action, but you don't know for sure. So there's a major push your luck element here, which again, I really like. And then you have the Upkeep Phase, in which you will perform possibly different kind of upkeep, of updating stats and moving cubes around and things like that. So the general idea is this: when a hero attacks, they choose an action, resolve it, spending life, possibly unless it's the zero cost action. Choose a recoup action, try to get stuff back, resolve the upkeep. Then the other heroes go, and then alas, the enemies do the same. The enemies do the same. They have their own table of this kind. You will randomly determine the target and their action using a mix of die rolls and also cards that will tell you what kind of action they perform. The idea that there are also cards is that this way, the actions of the enemies do not have to always be a range of 8 results exactly the same. Maybe you're instructed with a certain enemy to have a certain kind of like cards in here, making certain things to be more likely to happen. But other than that, they will determine their action and who is the target, roll dice, and apply the result just the same. With a lot of variants with different enemies that will have different abilities. There are a lot of different effects. You have a whole card for status effects, so you know there's going to be a number of them, positive or negative. So this is the general idea, and again, combat-wise, I like it very much. I hope to see this kind of combat system in more games, so in sequels to this game, because I think it's excellent. I think it gives the player so many interesting choices about the flow, how much you want to invest, about the pushing your luck element, which is again massive, and I think it's great. It gives you a lot of interesting decisions. Now, there are cases where some of the bigger fights with multiple enemies, in the long run, it feels a bit repetitive. So there are cases, I hope it's not a spoiler, where an enemy then starts summoning other enemies, and if you don't do something, more of those show up. And those just felt like they were dragging a little too long. I wish there had been more of a balance. And some points, I wish, like, okay, just tell me that a character is dead, and let's move on. I want to see what's in the next room, what's in the next place, what's in the next situation. And that's, well, again, some of those fights felt a little too long, that's all. But the general idea is really nice. So I like the idea of combat. I like the overall idea of the story, but I felt myself not super mega excited about it. After the first time, again, you're gonna see some of the content again, and just is not as exciting as before. I found that, again, when you have a story-driven game, the replay value is more limited, but I find that here the replay value went down pretty fast. But when it comes to the story itself, another thing is that I guess the idea, again, they were going for, you're exploring this mysterious place, very grim, very dark, you don't know what's happening. But also because of that, I felt that the story as a story was missing a little bit of a bite. Ultimately, it did feel like a sequence of combat with some scenes in between, which may say most fighting fantasy books are like that, most fighting fantasy game books are like that. I cannot measure, but I can only use my experience to inform me about what I think about the game. And I felt that I wish there was more story, there were more meaningful interactions, that it didn't feel like an old school dungeon, which is about dark rooms and monsters and looting. If it is a narrative driven game, I wish there had been more significant interaction with characters, but you still do get a sense that choosing to go right or left or trying to kill monsters efficiently is the vast majority of the interactions, the vast majority of the ways in which you can influence the story world. And if that is the case, then again, if it's a game about combat, I may as well go for one that has a lot more variety in it. I just don't know if you switch some of these encounters, if you change them, the order the story would change or the flow of the story would change. And I don't think it would, in which case, again, you could just have this combat system, which is excellent, in a more of a procedurally random generated kind of situation. Again, I feel that it has the structure of a game book, but not quite the narrative feel of it. And to me that was a little bit of a limitation. And again, they want to keep the sense of a mystery, but sometimes again you kill a monster after another and you reach the end, and there are some endings which you really have no idea what the heck is happening, and probably will feel disappointing. Matter of fact, some endings are extremely negative, although you did everything well, so to speak. You fought every fight, you passed every combat. And again, that happens in game box. You do everything correctly, and then you still turn the corner and you die horribly. But that's not something that I particularly enjoyed in game books either, the insta-death. And so I don't particularly enjoy it here, especially because, again, looking just strictly at the story, it's hard to figure out what kind of that I don't get the sense that you often have the information that you need to make good decisions. If you went back and like, oh my gosh, I missed that clue, of course, if I had known that, as opposed to a lot of these decisions are pretty blind with the information that you're given, and so it really feels like the classic left door, right door, one you die and one you continue with the story, which again we have seen in game box, and again is not something I enjoy very much. I prefer if the story gives enough clues and information to be able to make informed decisions, so that not only is there a true path, but there is also a way of identifying it. So, Spire's End, I found the combat system very enjoyable, and the first run through, again with the exception of some encounters were a little long, I found it enjoyable also. It is a game, again, with fairly limited replay value, and the narrative structure, while at the beginning is going to be the strongest and most interesting thing, after a while it's something that I felt almost like it became detrimental to the experience. So I love the combat system. I have more mixed feelings about the narrative element of the story, but be it as it may, this is my review, this is my assessment for Spire's End.